Today we begin our discussion with the spark that starts World War I. By 1914, the Balkans was a powder keg of nationalist hatred and imperialistic rivalries. Here you see the Archduke and his family. On the 28th, 1914 of June, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria, along with his wife Sophie, were assassinated on their 14th wedding anniversary when they were visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. The assassin was Serbian patriot named Gavrilo Princip, who was a member of a secret group known as the Black Hand. The goal of the group was to organize South Slavic people into a new single nation. The assassination sparked controversy as to who was to blame. Austria believed that Serbian officials aided the plot and were angered when it became known that Serbian officials were aware of the plot but did not warn them about it. Austria was determined to punish Serbia. The assassination set off a chain reaction during the months of July and August that plunged Europe into a major war. Okay, so on July 23, demanding that Serbia stop anti-Austrian propaganda and punish any Serbian official involved in the murder plot, Slavic Russia, the big brother to Serbia, encouraged her to stand tough against Austrian demands. The alliance system, designed to preserve peace, had turned the assassination from what may have been a local war into a conflict that would engulf the great powers. On August 1st, 1914, Germany declares war on France because they were allied with Russia. After Russia refuses Germany's request to stop mobilization. On August 3rd of 1914, the German plan to attack France quickly could succeed only by crossing through Belgium. Germany asked Belgium for permission to cross through the country. Belgium refused. However, Germany invaded anyway, violating the Treaty of 1839, which had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality by all the great powers. On August 4 of 1914, Britain joins France and declares war on Germany. August 6, 1914, Austria declares war on Russia. So here you can see the chain of events, and you can see how the alliance system, which was originally designed by Bismarck to keep the peace, now becomes the cause of the war turning from local to all of Europe. Count Alfred von Schlieffen was chief of the General German Staff and developed the Schlieffen Plan, designed to prevent Germany from needing to conduct a two-front war. The plan was to quickly sweep through northern France, through Belgium in the west, and then turn to Russia in the east. The plan was to knock out France within 6 weeks, as in the Franco-Prussian War, and then transport troops to the Eastern Front to help the Austrians against the Russians. As you can see, propaganda posters were posted everywhere in order to sway public opinion and encourage support for the war effort. Here you have soldiers mobilized in the millions, and of course Russia, with a large population, has the most soldiers involved in the war. Women in the war effort. As a result of women's war efforts, Great Britain, Germany, and Austria granted women the right to vote immediately after the war ends. Another poster encouraging patriotic service. And here we have French women working in a factory, taking up the jobs that the men had traditionally done, but now were serving in the military. German women factory workers doing the same. And here we have a painting of an ambulance driver. And I wonder what the gentleman looking at the woman to his left is thinking. Okay, so it's common practice in a conflict to demonize the enemy. Here you have this painting, this illustrations poster that is depicting the Germans as brutish, as not human. Another poster, again, destroy this mad brute. Women are defenseless and they need to be defended against the German brutes. Okay, so the Western Front. Over a 4-year period, commanders on both sides of the Western Front launched offense after offense, hurling millions of men against enemy lines at tremendous loss of life. Yet the Western Front would budge no more than 10 miles in either direction during that time. This is where an elaborate network of trenches were dug that stretched for several miles. Here you can see what trench warfare looked like. Europe's hope for a quick war deteriorated into trench warfare as both sides dug in. Trenches stretched from the Swiss frontier to the English Channel. Life in the trenches was harsh. Soldiers roasted in the summer and froze in the winter. Sanitary conditions were horrible as soldiers shared their food with rats and their beds with lice. The trenches also bred influenza and bacterial infections. Two sets of trenches were separated from each other by about 300 to 600 yards of open ground. Churned up mud that had been devastated by shells and grenades was littered with human bodies. This was known as no man's land. At one point in 1917, the life expectancy of a soldier at the Western Front was 2 weeks. Constant rounds of shell fire whistling overhead had a devastating psychological effect, giving rise to a new psychological condition called shell shock. Today we call that post-traumatic stress syndrome. And the sad thing back then is that there were no facilities or, remedies to deal with people who had been shell-shocked. Today we have programs to help people that are suffering from post-trauma. The highest costs of death were a result of military officials trying to fight a war with using new technology with old strategies. In Verdun, in 1916, German Western Front strategies resulted in significant losses. They killed 377,000 Frenchmen at Verdun, but the loss of 337,000 Germans made it, equally difficult on each side. The loss of life was massive. Again, it was military officials trying to fight a new war using old strategies. The Somme in 1916 was the most disastrous of all the repeated offenses of the war. That summer, the French had just taken a terrible beating from the failed German offensive at Verdun, asked the British to take some pressure off their positions by undertaking to break the German lines at the River Somme in northern France. At 7:30 a.m. on the 1st of July 1916, 1 million men of the British Expeditionary Force went over the top to run across no man's land toward the enemy. In one morning and one afternoon of fighting, the British Army lost close to 60,000 soldiers and gained only about 100 yards across a 16-mile front. Over the next 2 months, the Somme offensive gained a total of 2 to 3 miles at a cost of 420,000 lives. Again, what they were doing is they were trying to come up against rapid machine gun fire. So when you had the advance of the soldiers, they were simply mowed down by the machine guns. Back then, if you were injured, they didn't try to repair your injuries. They usually just cut off your limbs. So many soldiers came back from World War I without arms and without legs. The Eastern Front. The Eastern Front did not get bogged down in trenches as the Western Front had, and the war was more mobile because battle lines covered much larger areas. The Germans defeated the Russians at the Battle of Tannenberg. Russians lost over 30,000 men, and 225,000 were captured in the fall of 1914. By 1915, over 2.5 million Russian soldiers were either killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. On the southern front, the British attacked the Ottoman Empire. The Gallipoli campaign was organized by Winston Churchill and was designed to strike at the Germans and Austrians through the Dardanelles and the Balkans. The campaign was a failure. In 1918, an Allied force won back much of the Balkans, and an Italian offensive compelled the surrender of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Japan seized German outposts in China and the Pacific. The British success in Palestine was followed by the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which called for the creation of a Jewish state. And here you see a picture of the Turkish cavalry in Palestine. They supported the Allies in the war effort. With Arab help, the British defeated the Ottoman Empire. Warfare in the colonial possessions went well for the Allies, seizing German possessions in Africa. In May of 1915, German submarines sank the Lusitania, a British liner, claiming it was carrying munitions. This act of aggression killed 1,200 people, of which 139 were Americans. President Wilson threatened to break off relations with Germany if they did not stop sinking neutral ships without warning. The second major cause of American entry into the European war was this telegram. In 1917, the British intercepted and decoded a message from the German foreign minister to Arthur Zimmermann, his ambassador in Mexico. The telegram promised that in return for Mexico's support, Germany would help Mexico win back Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. When this note was made public in the United States, it intensified anti-German feelings in the United States. On February 1st, the Germans announced the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, which led the United States to break off diplomatic relations with Germany. On April 6th, the United States declared war on Germany and entered the war. World War I is considered to be the truly technological war. New weapons such as the machine gun, larger artillery, armed tanks, poison gas, the airplane, and new systems of communication added greatly to the destructiveness of the war. Here you have the first tank. The armored tank moved on chain tracks, enabling it to cross many kinds of land. Tanks were introduced by the British at the Battle of Somme. Here you see, in the beginning, these tanks weren't always very effective. They were slow and clumsy. They eventually improved and aided the Allies in their war effort. World War I planes came in three varieties: single-wing, double-wing, and triple-wing planes. The more wings a plane had, the more mobility and stability it had, which made it easier for the plane to evade gunfire or to better maneuver in a dogfight. And these are the flying aces of World War I. They were the famous pilots who were responsible for being able to shoot down enemy aircraft. Hot air balloons were used during World War I as observers because they were cheaper than planes. However, the development of fighter planes made it more dangerous to use them. Zeppelins were also used. They were extremely vulnerable to ground fire, but could level buildings in seconds. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near a flamethrower, that's for sure. That was another new technology. Poison gas was introduced by the Germans in the Second Battle of Ypres in April of 1915 and was eventually used by both sides. However, the introduction of gas masks mitigated the effects of the deadly weapon. The machine gun provided a continuous stream of bullets that wiped out waves of attackers. This made it difficult for armed forces to advance and helped to create a stalemate. And towards the end of the war, you see a political cartoon that shows the Germans had simply run out of soldiers. They were willing to accept anyone into the military by 1918. Another very serious cause of death was a pandemic. The flu spread throughout Europe, throughout many parts of the world. And you can see there the deaths as a result of the flu were astounding. You had between 50 million and 100 million people die. Military leaders notified Kaiser Wilhelm II that the war was lost and he should step down. Wilhelm fled to Holland in early November, which led to the creation of a provisional Republican government. This government agreed to negotiations based on U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. So that's the end of World War I. We'll be talking next about Russia. Russia actually leaves World War I early because they have a revolution at home.